Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. My name is Natalia Moczulska and this is the news. The 30th day of the Russian invasion of Ukraine has passed. The intensity of Russian air attacks has decreased over the past 24 hours. Russian troops have now switched to the use of drones for reconnaissance activities. Almost 10 days have passed since the Russians attacked the Mariupol drama theater, where civilians were hiding. Today, the city authorities said that about 300 people were killed there.
Over 1,200 people were hiding in the drama theater in Mariupol. The Russians bombed the building despite the fact that there were writings saying, "There are children here." In turn, the Ukrainian forces reported that as a result of the hostilities, the Russian commander General Yakov Ryazantseva, who was subordinate to the 49th All-Military Army, Southern Military District, was killed. This is the 7th Russian general that Moscow lost during the 30 days of the war. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, since the beginning of the war, Russian forces have lost, among others, over 16,000 soldiers, 561 tanks, 1,625 armored vehicles, 291 artillery systems. The former commander of the 1st Army Aviation Brigade, General Dariusz Wroński, sees several possible scenarios of future Russian military operations. They suggest that they recreate readiness, pull up forces and complete units, and more vividly, they pull up fresh forces that will be able to strike for further escalation. This is a less optimistic scenario for Ukraine. In turn, the better one assumes maintaining the tendency to counterattack the Russian forces and the maintenance of the tendency to conduct offensive activities. We observe that at least a dozen localities have been recaptured and taken over by Ukraine. No Russian soldier has entered Kiev. They did not break the defense line, that ring. About 15 to 20 kilometers of a passageway was successfully dug out by Ukrainians using military language, which made the initiative around Kiev on the side of Ukraine. The Ukrainian Commissioner for Human Rights, Lyudmila Denisova, announced that the Russian side had confirmed data on the forced deportation of over 400,000 Ukrainians, among them over 80,000 children. They are exported, among others, from Mariupol, Volnovaha, and Stanica Luhanska, deep into Russia or its eastern part. A car drives through the city of Mariupol, from which the Russian military tells the Ukrainians that Ukraine is not accepting them anymore, and they have to go to Russia. Mykolaiv in southern Ukraine has been bombed almost from the beginning of the war. When the situation calms down for a while, the residents return to their dilapidated houses. We were already thinking about going to bed. I got up to fetch the water and suddenly heard a noise. I dropped my cup and ran to the bathroom, and at that moment, everything started to fall apart. The bullet hit the neighbor's house, and all the doors were smashed. Our door and neighbor's doors flew out, hitting us in the hallway. According to the reports of residents, the rockets hit a psychiatric hospital and a closed hotel building in Mykolaiv. There were a lot of tanks. We passed a lot of tanks and a lot of soldiers, especially the enemy. For some reason, there were fewer of our soldiers. We also saw armored personal carriers, and Dad found a rubber bullet somewhere. Yesterday at 9 o'clock, a heavy bombing of our village began. Hailstones, missiles, houses burned down. We barely escaped. Nevertheless, the fighting spirit in the Ukrainians is strong, not only among soldiers. We will fight to the end as best as we can, some with weapons and some with moral support and donation of money for our army. Our men should have everything, helmets and bulletproof vests. The General Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine informed that 135 children had died since the beginning of the war, while 184 children were injured.
U.S. President Joe Biden has arrived in Poland. Originally, President Duda was supposed to meet him at the airport in Rzeszów, but due to a plane failure, he arrived at Jasionka with a delay. At the time, Biden was already talking to American commandos stationed in Poland. Afterwards, he met refugees at the Congress Center, and later in the evening, he arrived in Warsaw.
The first point of the two-day visit of the American leader Joe Biden to Poland was a meeting with President Andrzej Duda and soldiers of the 82nd Airborne Division stationed in Rzeszów. Andrzej Duda emphasized that the current talks are an expression of strong Polish-American relations.
We're prepared to provide another $1 billion, as the ambassador pointed out, $1 billion for those who fled and those who are affected around the world as a consequence of the negative impact of this war on food security. The bad news is they're in the breadbasket of the world, Ukraine and Russia. But we, the United States, are going to do our part because we're the third largest producer of wheat in the world. And our Canadian friends are going to do the same thing. But we're going to try very hard. But in the meantime, the suffering that's taking place now is at your doorstep. You're the ones who are risking, in some cases, your lives and risking all you know to try to help.
Thank you for coming to the place where the influx of refugees to Poland is the biggest. Your presence here, Mr. President, is first of all a big sign of unity, a huge sign of support and unity with my country, Poland. It demonstrates great friendship between Poland and the United States and a very profound alliance. This is an evidence of great support and care for our mutual relations, but also of great importance to me. It's a sign and message that you care about the security of Poland. The U.S. president flew to Poland directly from Brussels, where he held a series of meetings at an emergency summit of NATO, the European Union, and the G7 group. The American leader stressed that in the wake of Russia's aggression, the allies are united in defending democracy with the Ukrainian people. Joe Biden also addressed China's economic future and the potential consequences that would result if Beijing provided support to Russia.
We would respond. We would respond if he uses it. The nature of the response would depend on the nature of the use. I had a very straightforward conversation with Xi now, I guess it's 6 days ago, 7 days ago, in that range. And I made it clear to him, I made no threats, but I made it clear to him that make sure he understood the consequences of him helping Russia.
At the extraordinary NATO summit, the allies were unanimous. Support Ukraine with all of your might. Do everything using peaceful tools to stop Russian aggression, while ruling out the possibility of military intervention. The decisions we took at the summit are only aimed at strengthening the deterrence and defense mechanism of the alliance. We once again stress that the alliance is not involved in a mechanism that will threaten Russia or any third country. First of all, there is a unanimity on continuing to support Ukraine, providing it with the weapons and defense equipment it needs. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has spoken to us very clearly on these needs, and deeply, the position of all the allies remains the same, to continue to provide defensive weapons and lethal assistance, to do so within the framework of full effectiveness, but with a red line, which means, as you know, to continue not to be co-warriors. Meanwhile, G7 leaders at a meeting in Brussels announced that they were limiting Russia's ability to trade gold. The leaders of the world's richest countries called on international organizations to review ties with Russia. G7 representatives also announced that they would take joint steps to prevent Russia from circumventing sanctions imposed on it. The meeting also showed that we are more united than ever in this difficult situation, and that we are acting together and decisively. This is reflected in today's joint statement by the G7. We have responded to this flagrant violation of international law by Russia with tough, closely coordinated and targeted sanctions. We are united in our commitment to maintain these sanctions for as long as necessary and to continually review their effectiveness. All meetings were virtually attended by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Today, I made several important speeches to the participants of the NATO summit, the G7 summit, the European Union Leaders Summit, to the Swedish Parliament. All of this is to ensure the support of our country. We need it for our protection. I spoke to the President of Lithuania, the Prime Minister of Israel, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. All this to make Russia understand one thing: we need to achieve peace. Tomorrow, Joe Biden will again meet with President Andrzej Duda and deliver a speech on the united efforts of the free world in support of the Ukrainian people. While in Warsaw, the U.S. president will meet with refugees and volunteers at the National Stadium. Among others, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki will accompany him on the visit.
During the meeting with representatives of Gazeta Polska clubs, Ukrainian Ambassador Andrii Deszczyca appealed to the European Union to unfreeze EU funds for Poland. As he added, they would also help Ukraine. The meeting was also attended by the Minister of the Family, Marlena Maląg, who summed up the government's assistance to Ukrainians so far.
We hope that the attitude of European and Atlantic countries will be as effective and firm as the attitude of Poland. We urge the European Union to give Poland the resources it deserves, the €160 billion reconstruction fund, which will help Ukrainians who fled the war to Poland. The government has prepared this support, which should be a roof over their heads, food, and the means to stay. But we have to prepare that refugees will be with us for longer. That's why we guarantee legal residence for 18 months with access to work. The latter is very important for us because out of all the Ukrainian citizens, there are mostly women and children who want to live with dignity.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and other programs. But from me, it's have a great night.